thank you for those of you joining us today live on this webinar. You guys can use the chat or ask any questions if you have. For those of you on Facebook, feel free to go ahead and post in the comments. We'll be able to get back to you throughout the day. But I would like to welcome our guest of honor today, Julia Lashay, our head of inclusion and belonging at KWRI. Welcome, Julia. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Liz. I am so honored and glad and happy and excited to be here.
You are all the things to be here then.
All of that.
For those of you who have not seen an interview with Julia, somehow if you have missed one in all this time, she always brings some energy and she's always a great interview. So I'm glad to see we have all the things going today.
All the things. Thanks
so
for having me,
here
Liz.
today to talk about creating inclusivity and belonging in a work environment, something that for some folks can be uncomfortable and they don't necessarily know how to approach it. So let's just start the conversation with what is inclusivity and belonging in the workplace? Like, what does that even mean for?
Well, it's interesting that you actually started off by saying for some folks, it can be uncomfortable in the workplace. I often share a story that a team leader told me. She asked her agents at a team meeting, when we say the word diversity, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you? Oftentimes people will automatically think race or color or religion or something like that. And she had done one of those Wordle things, like where people put it on their phone and then it shows up on the screen. And the number one word that they said was uncomfortable. When people say diversity, the number one word that comes to mind is uncomfortable. And that's interesting. A lot of people are shocked and surprised by that. But as you just started off by saying, sometimes this conversation of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, people don't know what to expect of it. And so it is sometimes uncomfortable. So I think what we should probably do is just first start off by actually defining what those things mean, especially since just in full transparency and honesty, out in the world right now, the term DEI is kind of being used as a bad word, so people don't know like what to do, where do I move? How do I talk?
What do I say? What do I do? Where can
maybe I don't, So let's just first start by what we're even talking about. Diversity is just people. That's how I define it. Diversity is a bunch of people. And anytime you got a bunch of people together, they're going to all be different. There's going to be a very big difference between every single person, every single client that you have, which, by the way, 100% of our clients are people, Liz. Right. So the thing is,
I don't think my dog is buying any real estate.
I don't think we have any iBots buying real estate yet, but they're all people, and every single one of those people are different. A lot of times when people hear diversity, they do think automatically, they think race or racism. But the reality is diversity is literally anything that makes me different than you. And there's probably thousands of things that make me different than you, and all of our clients different from each other. And just understanding that and recognizing that every single person we encounter is very, very unique. That's what diversity is. In fact, in the world of real estate, the number one fair housing violation is actually against people with disabilities. And it has nothing to do with race or color or anything. So in the world of real estate, diversity means different abilities and different all kinds of things. And so all we're talking about when we talk about diversity is all of our clients, all of the people we encounter, and how different they often are. And the equity part is just the part that we recognize that since everybody is very different, we're all coming from different places. We have different starting points. We have different vantage points. We have different perspectives. And we just want to make sure that all of those different people have the tools and the resources they need to get whatever opportunity they're trying to get. So for us, if we're serving our clients, we recognize each and every single one of them is different. And they might need different information, education, resources, tools to access the same opportunity that our other clients are accessing. In the world of real estate, I use down payment assistance as an example. We might have one client that needs down payment assistance in order to get the house. That's equity. You can use that as an example of equity. And the inclusion part, the part we're going to talk about today, well, that's simple. How do we just make people feel welcome and like they belong?
Yep.
I want people to come and work with me, but they're not going to want to come and work with me if I don't make them feel like they belong here, right? So how do we make people feel like they belong? And that this is a space where they can reach whatever the opportunity is they're looking to reach, whether it's buying a house or getting a job or working on your team or working in your market center or whatever it is. How are we creating a space where people have that sense of belonging. Because if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the sense of belonging is way up there in that pyramid.
Yep.
It is an innate human desire to belong to something. In fact, most of us here at Keller Williams are here because we wanted to belong to the culture. We could really sell real estate anywhere, right?
Yeah, when you look at it and we go to the hierarchy of needs and the need to belong, and this is a conversation I have with folks all the time when they say, well, why would somebody come work with me? And I'm like, believe it or not, most people do not like to be isolated, right? And it's just this, and we go, well, of course not. Of course they don't want to be isolated. And yet it's, we don't necessarily think about that in our business of people want to belong to a group. They enjoy being part of a community.
Your community, KW Talent.
Very evident, right? Like,
yeah,
all we had to do was stay in our houses, and that was a real challenge. Right?
Yeah.
What they wanted to, they wanted to belong. They wanted to be part of something and around people.
That's why people join churches. That's why people join book clubs. That's why people join our KW communities. People want to belong and be a part of something. In fact, quite frankly, my team in Minneapolis, the Signature Group, our biggest selling point is that we're kind of cool to be around and people want to belong to the club. That's really the selling point.
I mean, that's a pretty cool selling point, let's be honest.
But the reality is that people really have an innate desire, honestly, above what they're going to eat, how much money they're going to make, where they're going to live. People just want to belong. So in business, understanding that all of those people are very different and they're going to all need different resources to get opportunities and things. And the one thing they're all going to need is to feel like they belong and that they're included in whatever it is you're doing. And so when we talk about inclusion and belonging in the workplace or on your team or in your market center, or even with your clients, all we're talking about is all of the people getting all of the things and having all the feels. That's all that is. That's DEI in a nutshell. Yeah.
It's like a big hug of a webinar. Right?
Yeah.
We're gonna do a big group hug. So let's look at it from a standpoint of single agent starting their first team, right? Like that, I'm making my first hire and I've got this great person I want to hire, and I want to make sure that I tell them that I want them to feel good and that they can have open conversation with me. What's the approach there? What do we say?
Well, I guess the first thing is probably really embracing the fact that everybody is going to be different and really embracing that concept that I just shared about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because the diversity part is if I'm hiring an admin, which I actually currently am hiring an assistant, I am absolutely not hiring somebody who's just like me, because that would be a catastrophe. Right. So here's where, friends, I'd love for you all to expand your minds when we say the word diversity, to not be uncomfortable, but to realize we're talking about all the different things that make people different, skill sets, perspectives, personality profiles, all of those things that make people very different are actually what we're looking for. But you, as the leader in this conversation, will need to actually be receptive to the fact that they're going to have some different personality styles and they're going to have some different skill sets and they're going to have and they might be different than yours. But understanding and respecting the perspective is the important part. A lot of times I share stories about people that I meet. I meet a lot of cool people along the way. In this job, especially. I've been telling the story. This is my story this month. The story of the month is a conversation I had with an agent who is an atheist, and he attended an event and he did not feel like he was included or that he belonged. And it was my favorite conversation to date because I learned so much in the conversation. And I learned so much about his perspective, his viewpoints. And by the way, he wasn't wrong. The interesting thing is, of course, my parents are pastors and I come from the church, right? I grew up in the church. So we had very different beliefs on religion, right? But that didn't make him wrong and it didn't make me right. It made his perspective that he was sharing with me very different. And I respected that perspective because it was unique. And I didn't have that perspective from my vantage point. And so it helped me to be like, okay, great. What can we do when we have people who are different than us to still make everyone have that sense of belonging? And by the way, I found out that there are thousands of people that felt the same way that are just like him, and so the beauty of the friendship that I have now is that I get to learn from that And now we can actually reach a whole lot of people who I probably never would have met, but you have to just be open to the fact that people might have a different perspective or a different belief or a different whatever than you. You don't have to necessarily agree with it. I don't agree with his religious standpoint, and he doesn't agree with mine, but we certainly do want to do business together.
Right.
And it helps our business grow, actually. In fact, we call that in one of our modules for the diversity certification, growing through our differences. Because now that I've met him, I know how to appeal and to reach other people who are like him, who have that same perspective as him, and how to make an environment where everyone wants to feel comfortable. And now I'm doing more business than I was before I met him, right? So, the bold law, your business grows to the extent that you do. So if we continue to meet new people that are different than us, challenge us, have different perspectives, I would invite them to be on your team, because it's going to probably reach a broader audience than you would have done on your own.
It's interesting. We tend to like people like us, right?
Of course.
Yeah. I like you. Like, you like baseball. I like baseball. Let's go watch baseball. Football's starting. Like, this is all great.
Yeah.
And we can relate so easily over some things like that. And then we can be so different on things like the religion's a great example on that, because that's not, no one's wearing on their t-shirt what, their religion is. No one's wearing necessarily those beliefs right there that you can see. And those are things that become part of conversations and part of relationships that get uncovered. And it, like we said at the beginning, it can make someone uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. I'm
not allowed to talk about that. Wait,
yeah.
We said religion? Like, I can't talk about
And guess what else, Liz? The interesting thing is religion is the oldest and most meaningful way that people differ. So even when we talk about diversity, we say, okay, disability is the #1 fair housing violation. Religion is the oldest and most meaningful way that people are diverse. And so, yes, so I guess what I'm saying is, what becomes really cool and really helpful and healthy for your business is for you to like, oh, that's fascinating. Tell me more about that, instead of being uncomfortable with it. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Again, nobody's asking you to believe it. You don't have to adopt that as your own belief. It's good to learn about it. It's good to respect it, and it's not really, and the more conversations you have with people about things that make them unique, that make them different than you, the more comfortable we become with having conversations with people that are different than us.
Well, and I've found, when you have a conversation with somebody about something like that, and you say, I'm curious from your perspective, and they get to be heard, and you acknowledge and you listen, people, it's amazing, become incredibly receptive, and they appreciate it. It's
absolutely
for listening to me, right? Like, that's creating that inclusive environment where it's okay, right?
Most people want to tell you about themselves. And the other part about that you just mentioned is most people want to be able to show up as themselves. And so if you give someone that space to say, tell me about yourself. Oh, that's fascinating. I've actually never met anyone that was, whatever. Tell me more about that. Oh, that's pretty cool. And then they feel safe. Like, maybe I can actually show up as myself. And of course, if people can show up as themselves, you're going to get a lot more productivity out of them than if they have to put on a mask and pretend to be somebody they're not.
Yeah. Happy people are more productive, right? It's a better environment. It creates culture. They want to show up to work. They want to work hard for people that appreciate them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's exactly it. So we talked about earlier, right? You mentioned the some information, some classes that you've got on there too. You briefly touched on them. And I know you've been on airplanes the last week, talking to several of our regions, I think from one coast all the way to the other, as a matter of fact.
It was a long flight. I didn't even know you could fly that long and still be in the United States, but you can.
I flew from Miami to LA and back in 20 hours a few weeks ago.
OMG, that was my flight path. That's why I came from Miami to California. Yeah.
Let me tell you, that was a long haul. That was
are we still on the plane? Are we still in the United States? Yeah. But I was doing that. I was doing that for the inclusive leadership class that we are offering now, and we offer it to regions. We've been doing it at regional events. However, we certainly could do it in your market center. And the purpose of that class is just basically what we're talking about right now, Liz. The purpose of that class is how do we create a space or an environment where people want to come and work with us, and that they feel like, hey, this is the place where I can thrive. This is the place where entrepreneurs thrive, no matter what they look like, who they are, where they come from. How do we create that type of an environment? How do we be that kind of leader that creates that type of environment. So that's actually our newest class, is the inclusive leadership class. The first two, Color of Real Estate and Unconscious Bias in Real Estate, are kind of our foundational classes, if you will. The Color of Real Estate just talks about the history of land transfer that we should know as realtors, and more importantly, our role in that. How do we make sure that anybody who wants to get into homeownership can, you know? And my favorite class is actually Unconscious Bias in Real Estate, because we like to pretend like we're perfect people, especially because we're supposed to, because if we don't, we'll get fined, you know? So like we try to.
That's not really set up for us to learn by failure there, is
Yeah,
it?
yeah. We don't, nobody wants to be like, oh yeah, sometimes I steer, you know, because yeah, that's a $16,000 fine, right? But the reality is we all do. We all do things, you know, we all do things that sometimes maybe we shouldn't. And so I like the Unconscious Bias class, because it's like, let's take off the mask for a second. Let's just be honest. We're just people. Like me, I'm a super judgy person. I came to find out. Someone else told me this, by the way. But
Well, that would be fun. Yeah, that sounds like a great conversation.
But you know, I do. It was actually my team member. He showed me a picture of a closing. He was at a closing with a client, and he sent me a picture of the closing. And I said, "Who is that guy?" He said he met you in an elevator, and you were looking at his shoes, and you judged him, and you didn't want to talk to him. And I was like, I did not. Why would I do that? Why would I look at his shoes and then decide I didn't want to talk at him in the elevator? And then I was thinking about it, like, well, what kind of shoes did he have on? You know?
And all of a sudden you saw yourself doing it.
Yeah, we're just people, okay? Like, I didn't mean to, and I certainly didn't mean for him to know that I looked at it and then turned my nose up, you know? Like, we're all just people, we do stuff, right?
Elevators are weird. Where else do you look? Like, or you look down, I guess.
Part of the class is to be like, okay, listen, let's stop playing for a minute. Right. We all do stuff. It's not for us to come out of the class and be perfect people. It's just for us to be a little more aware about some of the biases that we do have that might be interfering in our business and might be preventing us really from doing business with some really cool people. So those two classes, and then they're the whole setup for the Agent of Distinction Diversity Certification. And that class is designed to just teach all of our people about people. That's what it is. 100% of our clients are people. They're going to all be different. What do we need to know that we don't know that we don't know? And there turns out there's a lot that we don't know that we actually need to know. Even when we talk about marketing and advertising, which is one of the key things we do as real estate agents, is we market and advertise. But a lot of times we're doing so in a way that isn't receptive to everybody. We're not really being accessible with that. Again, being that disability is the #1 fair housing violation, we are doing a lot of things that aren't helping people who are hard of hearing or have visual impairments or whatever. And we could be doing things differently. Like the Instagram posts we make with the videos and the cool captions come across the screen. Guess what? Those aren't just cool. A lot of people can't hear, you know, and so now we're actually being accessible. So using tools like that to reach more people, right? What kind of words are we using?
You said that we were on a leadership session. You were speaking, and I think it was to the community leaders, and you were talking, and you said that, and I was like, oh, like I knew those were closed captions for that reason. Like it says closed caption, but it didn't really click with me that is also there, like it's actually there for an accessibility because a large portion, and you'd shared the statistic at the time, and I was just shocked.
1 in 4 adults have a disability.
I was shocked. And you know, the horrible thing about that is my significant other that I live with has a bionic ear, and he can't hear very good in one ear. And it just didn't even occur to me.
It doesn't either. My brother can't hear out of one ear. It just never occurs to us. And therefore, we're actually not being the best fiduciaries we can be. We're actually not reaching a lot of people that we could be reaching. So Agent of Distinction talks about things like that, how to actually go out into your community and like be a community leader, and by way, get business, you know? So that's what the diversity certification is just learning all the things that we just kind of don't think about, you know, that we should probably now all the time. I notice all the time that I'm like hyper vigilant. I'm like, I don't think anybody in the entire world can hear. Because I was on a panel with a gentleman and nobody realized but me, he had a reader on because he couldn't hear. So it was actually putting everything we were saying so that he could read it. And nobody noticed that this guy was deaf. But I notice these things now. And so then you're able to
Right.
so when I was speaking, I'm speaking directly to him so he can see my mouth, right? There's just things that we just aren't paying attention to a lot of times. Yeah.
Something that the ability to bring awareness to something like that, right? Like where it just didn't occur to anybody else there. And if he didn't bring it up, but
Right.
you notice because now you have an awareness of things.
Correct.
Those are
Yes.
things that we look for. And I think that's one of the really important things when we look at the agent of distinction and everything that comes along in that certification, the classes, and just the conversations around it of one, it destigmatized talking about it, which is
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah.
And I think that's the first step for a lot of people is, well, how do I actually talk to somebody about what do I talk about here?
Yeah.
It's huge, which I'm so glad to have you on here today. But two, wait, you mean there's actually additional resources that I can
Right.
go? Like, thank
Yeah.
God. Like, that's
Well,
so
the other thing
cool.
people don't know is we have all these actual groups for that. We have 12 affinity groups at KW now. And so the newest group is actually a KW special needs group. And through that group, there's all kinds of resources, questions you should be asking in your buyer listing presentation. We've got two really cool agents that their whole business is around helping people with disability and special needs because turns out it's hard to find houses for wheelchairs, you know. So there's some really cool things that we have to offer. We actually have a whole market center playbook from KW Signs for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Like, what do you do in your market center when you're trying to have a team meeting and you have some people who cannot hear? You know, what do you do when you have a client that says that you legally have to get them resources so they can, you know, how do we handle these things? So we actually have all kinds of resources people don't know we have.
Which is great because
Yeah.
also I didn't know about the market center stuff there, and now I do know. Right, that's a great example of it, and we just don't know what we don't know, and there's resources,
Exactly. Yeah.
which is awesome.
But the more we know, I think the fascinating thing for me, I know diversity and inclusion and those conversations are uncomfortable for some people. I'm like super energized by them because every day I learn something new about people. There's like so many things to learn about people. And I really do believe that bold lie. I use it all the time now because your business grows to the extent that you do. My whole life has been so enriched by people I never would have met if I actually wasn't doing this job and intentionally meeting people who weren't like me. Right. So it's just a really fascinating journey to come on. And I'm hoping that someday people get as excited about diversity, equity, and inclusion as I do. It's not a scary thing. It's just we're all people and we're all different.
I would love to see you do somebody's life story and ask questions in their motivational interview because I bet you ask great questions.
You know what? I haven't done one since I've been in this role, and I probably would have some very different questions to ask.
Well, Julia, it just so happens I'm in need of recording one of those with somebody soon. So you may get another email from us.
Oh, yeah, I just am fascinated by people. They're really fascinating. And you know, I think some of that though, when we have that conversation is, I was just talking to somebody and they were saying, I mean, let's be honest, there is a lot of hate in the world, you know, and somebody was saying that some people send really mean stuff here actually, to KWRI. Stuff that you just wouldn't believe that our agents would actually say, but they do. And I have learned that it's very, very, very rarely and very seldom does it really actually come from a place of hate. It almost always comes from a place of lack of understanding and a lack of empathy. Most people actually aren't bad people. Most people just really have a huge lack of understanding about the world that we're in, the diverse world that we're in. And because they have a lack of understanding, they lack empathy, you know. And I think it's really cool if you just my ask, what do we call that? Call to action would be for each and every single person listening to this to go out of your way to meet somebody different than you today, and learn what you can learn about them, and you'll kind of find out that that's cool. That's different than I thought. And again, I'm not asking you to agree with it, believe it, join it. I'm not telling you to join their church or their cult or their whatever they're in. I'm just asking you to just learn about them and be like, that's interesting. Now you know something new about people. And the more times you do that, really, also, by the way, our job is to talk to people, right? So, and this is
the more conversations you're having, the better. Yes.
We are not in a market right now where you can be like, I only want to talk to one kind of people. There's not enough people that are to go around right now to do that. We got to talk to all the people. But the more you do that, really, the more fascinating and enriching your life is and the bigger your business gets.
I love that. I think that's a great point. I'm actually going to pull up your Agent of Distinction slide here really quick. So if
Let's do
anybody,
that. Yay.
yeah, there we go. So now we've got it up there. That way, if anybody wants to take a look at the Agent of Distinction information, we've got a good QR code right there. Let me scroll.
And you can do it online, self-paced modules by yourself on your own sweet time. There's 5 modules. None of them are longer than 40 minutes. Or once a quarter, we do it as a cohort. But if you pay to do it online, you can always come to the cohort. If you pay to the cohort, you can always do it online. So it's a twofer. But I feel like if people are listening to this KW Talent, they should get something for that. And so I'm going to give you a coupon code. And the coupon code is AOD- that's a hyphen, 50. AOD- 50. It's 50% off with that coupon code. Thank you. That's it in the chat there. Yep. Because I think as a member of KW Talent, you ought to get something half off for that.
Hey, I always love good discounts for everybody. Discounts for everybody. There we go.
And it does cost money, because here's the thing. I would love to have that be free. I think everyone should take it. I think it should be free. It costs money because we actually have a lot of initiatives for our market centers to be more inclusive, and they cost money. So that's how we pay for it, actually.
Well, and it's not, I think the class is what, $250? Like it's,
yeah, it's $249. Yeah.
It's very nominal, right? And now it's 50%
Yeah.
off. And rumor has it lawsuits are significantly more expensive, as are fines. So
your first fair housing fine is $16,667. Yeah. I would much rather pay $125.
I agree.
To learn what I didn't know, right?
And for the folks on Facebook, we will post that link to the class as well in Austin, the KW events page, and the coupon code there. So we've got it. Julia, if there's anything else you want to leave anybody with today before we sign off on our last 2 minutes that we've got you here before you jump, what would it be?
At the end of the inclusive leadership class, there's a little quote that I have, and it says, "Be the reason someone feels welcomed, seen, heard, loved," and something else. But be that reason, right? Be the reason someone feels welcome and loved and seen and heard. Just go out of your way to make people feel good. That's all.
I like that. I like that. That's good. I think everybody can make somebody feel good today, right? Just asking, tell me about yourself is a good way to start that conversation.
Yeah.
Well, Julia, we appreciate your time. If anybody wants to reach you, how might they do that?
So easy. equity@kw.com.
All right, perfect. Well, folks, we will drop the link and send to you the recording for those of you that were registered for this webinar. If you are watching on Facebook, we will include it there. And you can reach Julia at equity@kw.com. We hope to see you all in the Agent of Distinction classes and certification coming up. And Julia, I will see you tomorrow in Austin.
Sure will. All right, see you then. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, everybody.